Hello everyone! I have great news for you if you haven't been keeping up to date on like Wowhead and everything that's been going on, the buzz in the air. Feral Druid has been completely reworked in terms of the talent tree in Dragonflight. It's just a completely different tree, which is why I'm making a video now to talk about it. And it's fantastic that it's happening, but it's probably going to take me a couple videos to really talk through everything that's happened. I have a 4-hour VOD, which I will link to in the description below when I'm done with this video. 4-hour VOD that we spent today talking about it fully, with a bunch of Feral Theory crafters and just viewers and players and everybody that's loving Feral right now. And we came up with a few builds, we came up with some issues, some positives, and so I'm going to make a couple videos on this. I think this video is just going to be covering the abilities, what they're all doing at the moment, my general overview and thoughts, my general positives and general concerns. Then I'll probably make, depending on how this video is, I'll probably make a second video talking about different various builds and why I think they might be good in certain situations. And then lastly, maybe some kind of like utility discussion and talking about avenues in which Feral could see more utility, or just general changes that could occur to the tree where I'd like to move certain things, delete things, add things, that kind of stuff. So that's just kind of a heads up on what this is all going to be, but I'll take you through this video now. So I have the tree loaded up, but what I want to talk you through very quickly is I'll give you a quick synopsis. Again, I'll link to this. This is an official Blizzard Blue post. This is what they've said about the Feral Druid tree. I'll give you the link to this in case you haven't seen it. But basically, the core things to take from this are the identity of Feral. They're saying at its core, Feral's gameplay is about applying and maintaining powerful bleeds on enemies. That is the core for them as what Feral should be doing. We've added several more options to make bleeds more interesting or useful in different situations. Great, that's fantastic that they are understanding the identity of what Feral should be. Complexity. TLDR on this one is that they're going to have some talents that are maybe easier to use but less rewarding, and some talents, particularly on choice nodes, that are going to be more difficult to use, more of a nuisance, more maybe like resourceful, higher cost in resources or something to use them, but they will add more damage. You'll get more of a reward from the higher complexity stuff, which I think is good. I think it's good to have high complexity, low complexity, and allow people to be lazy if they want to be, or really push the boundaries if they want to be. In terms of choice, I think the most important thing here that they're saying, other options allow you to customize how much energy regeneration you have, how powerful your combo point builders are, how often you need to refresh your bleeds, or how powerful your Berserk and Tiger's Fury cooldowns are. This is great, because this opens up different avenues for different styles of build that we can have. This shows that they are going to be trying to make sure that you can have different options in playstyle. And I think that's fantastic. I think that's really important. You don't just want one cookie cutter build. There's always going to be a best thing, but I think it's important to give people choice and say, hey, you know what? I just want to play I want to play an Adaptive Swarm build. Or I really want to play an Incon build. I really want to build my Berserk up. Like, give people the option to do these things and allow there to be talent points to complement those avenues. So I think that's really important. I'm glad. I'm really happy just generally that Blizzard's given us some love. You know, no flame to the previous developer on Feral, but just this, whoever's come to step in and do this Druid stuff has clearly listened. They clearly have a vision, right? Here, right? They clearly have a vision. And that's fantastic, and I support what they're doing, and I think they're going to get a lot of love in return. I've seen all your comments on my YouTube video saying, I wish Feral was bleed-based. Well, here you go, baby. You're about to get it. Let's jump in to this first, just talking about every single talent. I'm going to read them out to you and let you know where they're all going. And then, like I say, I'll do new videos talking about some builds and utility and changes and stuff. So, something to note that's very, very important. Savage Roar is gone. It's gone. It's really important. Some people will love it. Some people will hate that. I'll let you decide how you feel about it. But we start off, we have Tiger's Fury here. And something immediately to note, by the way, is how many options we have. This tree, there's some nodes that are actually missing. Like if you look at this, the basis here, there's actually a node that connects from here to Curio. It doesn't exist here in this tree. This tree I've got is maybe a little bit like scuffed, but that's okay. I think that's the only issue with it. I think everything else is exactly the same. So that's fine, no problem. We know that that's going to be there. But we, on the original Feral Druid tree, had 36 connections or links. In this tree, we have something like 56. So we've got 20 or so, give or take, additional connections to allow us to make different choices. Let alone, we just have more talents to select from in general. I'm pretty sure. I haven't counted, but you can just look at the two trees and you can say, this is way more options. So that's great, just looking at it visually. Now let's take you through each and every one of the talents here. So Tiger's Fury, this is just default Tiger's Fury, 20 energy, 15% damage, 10 seconds. This is default Omen of Clarity, as we know and love it now. Clear casting increases the damage of your next spell cast, of the combo point generators. Something new here, Protective Growth. Your regrowth protects you, reducing all damage you take by 3% whilst it is on you. I love the idea. It's one of 3 utility options, right? We have Protective Growth, we have Predatory Swiftness, and we have Survival Instincts. Only 3 utility options in this tree, which is a big negative for me, but I can get into that in another time. Protective Growth, I love the idea. It's early in the tree. It's a defensive thing. However, we have enough defensives here. If anything, too many, not enough utility. Maybe if this was something different, like 5% avoidance, and if you actually moved it to here instead, where it's like you can take it, but like maybe even swap it, right? I thought of the idea of making this actually like Feral Druid Shroud, and you put it here, and put Survival Instincts here. That way you get your defensive immediately, and you can get a defensive, like you can get a utility, raid or group wide or whatever, that's deep in the tree. You have to invest in it, but you're not fully committing to it. You can still have avenues to go to other directions as well. But if you were going to make Survival Instincts, I'll get on to Survival Instincts later. We can talk about that. But I like the idea, not strong enough. Primal Wrath, just as it comes. Improved Bleeds. Now, this is something that is already default. It's basically Wild Flesh Rending, but we actually have this inbuilt on our abilities. Shred and Swipe deal damage, increased by 20% on bleeding targets. Pouncing Strikes grants extra damage and combo points to Shred and Rake when striking from stealth. So this is something that is default on Rake and Shred. They both do 60% increased damage and gain 2 combo points when used from stealth. We're assuming that that is what this is going to be. Okay. Scent of Blood. Traditional Scent of Blood. Thrash reduces swipe cost. Tireless Energy. Your maximum energy is increased by 20 and grants 2% haste. That'll then increase to 4% haste if you take the second point. Haste is quite good with this build. You'll see why later. Sabertooth increases Ferocious Bite damage by 20% and increases damage dealt by Rip by 4% for each combo point spent for 4 seconds. Now things get interesting, okay? Sabertooth has changed. It's no longer going to extend your Rip, which means your Rips are going to be dropping off quicker. Their default 24 seconds. They're going to be dropping quicker. But your Ferocious Bite damage is flat, increased by 20%. And then your Rip is increased by 4% per combo point, so we're assuming 5 combo point finishes. So your Rip gets increased by 20% for 4 seconds, which your unhasted Rip tick rate is 2 seconds per tick. So you'll get 2 empowered Rip ticks on your Rip every Ferocious Bite. So you're gonna have to be like weaving your Ferocious Bites and your Rips on single target and in AoE, because remember this will apply to Primal Wrath as well. So 20% increased damage for that first 4 seconds of that or you know the 4 seconds after you Ferocious Bite. It doesn't snapshot. We assume you're not gonna have to reapply Rip. That would be weird. It would be dynamic scaling. You then have Piercing Claws, which is 2% and 4% crit increase, which is nice to have. But I just don't see a universe where you really take it in most builds. Potentially you are forced to take it in single target. We can talk about that in another build or another video. Predator, cooldown of Tiger Fury reset, extends the duration by 5 seconds. Traditional Predator. This is a lovely ability that a lot of people are asking for. Double Clawed Rake. Rake also applies Rake to 1 additional nearby target, which is just great for rake spreading. It could be buffed to 2 additional targets, in my opinion, but I'm not mad about 1 additional target, but I think 2 targets would be better. Because then you can actually, then you could actually make a rake spread build, and it'll potentially be competitive with some additional options, right? Right now, swiping is just going to outcompete rake spreading, but I can really see this ability on a, say like an ad cleave, on like small cleave, 2 to 5 targets in Mythic Plus, or on bosses that are maybe something like the 9 from SOD, where you have a boss where you have 2 mobs up for a lot of time. Because if you take like Double Clawed Rake plus Sudden Ambush plus Pouncing Strikes, you have this situation where your rakes are as if they're from stealth. So you get 60% increased damage applied to 2 targets. That's pretty good, especially when you can amplify rake where in other ways around the tree. This is going to be pretty good. Sudden Ambush. So this has been reduced to a 2-point trait. Finishing moves have a 5 or 10% chance per combo point spent to make your next rake or shred deal damage as though you were stealthed. So you basically have a 25 or 50% chance to get a stealth rake or shred. Dreadful Bleeding. Rip damage increased by 15% flat. Berserk Relentlessness. Berserk now grants combo point refund on finishing moves and causes rake and shred to deal damage as if stealthed. Combines with other Berserk abilities. So you're going to have to take this ability if you want any of these Berserk traits, which I think is kind of scuffed, but that's how it is. So you're still going to have build a Berserk in a way, but you don't really have to take it if you don't want to in most builds. Now you have this kind of situation where you have Pouncing Strikes, Sudden Ambush, and Berserk. If you take you can take Pouncing Strikes plus Sudden Ambush or Pouncing Strikes plus Berserk. But you don't have to take all 3 of these, but I think a couple of them, I'm trying to remember now, but a couple of them complement each other. Like, if you take Sudden Ambush, then you always want Pouncing Strikes, but you don't always need Berserk. So you can take Berserk, I don't know, between the 3 of them, there's iteration where you want 2 of them, but you don't always need 1 of them. You don't always need the 3rd. Anyway, I can't remember now. Primal Wrath consumes up to 4 seconds of rip damage on targets it hits and deals 75% of it instantly. This is insane. Consumes up to 4 seconds of the rip and then does 75% of the damage of that 4 seconds worth of rip. Now, again, as I said, unhasted rip is 1 tick every 2 seconds. So this is 75% damage of 2 ticks of rip, unhasted, unadjusted. So that's 75% damage of 2 rips get instantly consumed. Now if you apply that to Primal Wrath, you have uncapped AoE, you have initial on-hit damage of Primal Wrath, plus 2 ticks of rip, give or take, immediately on every single mob. That's insane. Plus you have the rip damage increased, plus you have the Sabertooth, like if you bite and then you can get like a big Primal Wrath immediately in AoE, that's just insane. You get a 20% damage amp plus 15% damage amp and then 2 ticks immediately of your rip. Insane. Taste of Blood, Ferocious Bite deals 1.5% increased damage for each bleed. This is just traditional Taste of Blood, goes up to 3%. Lunar Inspiration, traditional Lunar Inspiration. Predatory Swiftness, traditional. MOC, traditional. Ferocious Frenzy. Ferocious Bite also hits nearby enemies within 8 yards, afflicted by rip for 25% of the Ferocious Bite damage. Deals reduced damage over 8 targets. So this, I also see as like a cleave. Maybe on like 2 to 4 targets, it's better to Ferocious Bite Primal, Ferocious Bite Primal. Or like when you have Primal Wrath established, just be Ferocious Biting until you need to reapply your Primal Wrath. But then on maybe say like 5 or more targets, like 5 targets to uncapped or something, you end up just doing like Primal Wrath, and then you bite you Primal, then bite, then Primal, then bite. That way you're always getting your rip amplifier from Sabertooth, because you're going to need to bite and then rip. But this is cool. I like this interaction where you have like one uncapped AoE, one kind of cleave, and there's going to be a scenario where this is actually like better to spam bites, and then there's going to be a point where spamming or like alternating Primal and Ferocious Bite, you'll like alternate and that'll take precedent. Infected Wounds has been buffed, so it's still a 20% slow, but now you're also getting increased rake damage by 20%. It's in a little bit of an awkward position if you want to come and get it for single target, but I think for AoE it works well. I have ideas of where I want to put this trait, but I'll kind of talk about that in another video. You then have Raging Fury. Finishing moves extend the duration of Tiger's Fury by 0.2 seconds per combo point spent. Finishing move or choice node finishing moves have a 3% chance per combo point spent to grant 10% haste for 6 seconds. I like these, pretty cool. Berserk, this is just a reduction on your Berserk. Now the reduction of this has to entirely depend on how or what the cooldown is of your Convoke. If your Convoke is 2 minutes, then this needs to make sure that your Berserk is 2 minutes, which this would do. If your Convoke is 1 minute 30, then this needs to be 0.7 seconds. And if your Convoke is 1 minute, then this needs to be 0.9 seconds, or 0.7 is fine. Or 0.5 is fine, because then you can either have Convoke for every single Berserk or every second Convoke. Yeah. You then have Survival Instincts. I think Survival Instinct should be here on the tree, and I think that it should be, gives you a second application of, or a second charge of Survival Instincts. Don't know why our big defensive is in our tree, like, and there's no modifier to it. Utility defensives need to get modifiers, not just be like, oh, here's your defensive, here's your utility. It's like, let me get a modifier. Berserk Frenzy, this is just Frenzy Bands. Now you have Brutal Slash, does what Brutal Slash does, or you can take Wild Slashes. Swipe and Thrash deal 20% more damage. I think that's going to be really interesting. Right now, depending on number tuning, Swipe with this talent would do more damage than Shred on single target, outright, not even a conversation. So, number tuning definitely needs to take place with this tree. But that's cool. I like it. You probably wouldn't take Brutal Slash in AoE, but you probably take that Brutal Slash in single target if you were to come down this section of the tree. Carnivorous Instinct. Tiger's Fury damage increased by 3 or 6%. I have Fearful Symmetry. Tiger's Fury causes your next 2 finishers to restore either 1 or 2 combo points. That's a visual bug there. Or just been input wrong. Cat's Curiosity. Clear cast abilities generate 15 or 30% of their energy cost. Again, same thing. Bite Force is basically a weakened but passive Blood Talons. So Ferocious Bite and Rip deal 10% damage. Permanent. Or you can take Blood Talons, which requires more thought process, but you get 30% damage. I like the idea. I would potentially like to see, because a lot of people either like old Blood Talons or they like new Blood Talons. I would like to see this be a choice node between old and new Blood Talons. Old Blood Talons, what it did, because both of these, they increase the damage of your finishers. You have so many nodes that are increasing the damage of your finishers. What Old Blood Talons would do is allow you to get more damage from your combo point generators, which would make builds like a Rake spread build stronger, which is really important because it allows for build variety. It also allows for the player to decide which Blood Talon style is easier for them to do or more desired for them to do, and it puts the choice in the player's hand and gives more additional build options. So I would like to see that there. Feral Frenzy, classic PvP ability, love it, might get played in some builds. Adaptive Swarm, way too expensive. This Unbridled Swarm thing needs to go. This is a 3-point talent. Way too expensive on talent points this far down the tree, because you're going to have to sacrifice either Circle of Life and Death and Apex, or Circle plus one of these. Like, you're just not going to make these sacrifices for Unbridled Swarm. Adaptive Swarm will only be a PvP / a single target ability, and even then, I don't think you take it, dependent on how this ability ends up working. I don't like this, needs to change, needs to be condensed and just made one ability, or they need to do something here to make it less expensive for what you get, make it more powerful, make it more desirable. Next, you have Incon or Convoke. Incon just reduces, you get all the Berserk effects that you've taken elsewhere in the tree, reduces the energy cost of your abilities by 20%, and extends your Incon to 30 seconds, or your Berserk to 30 seconds. Not very strong. However, if you play a Builder Berserk Incon Frenzy Band build, and then you take this trait, which makes it so that your auto attacks have a chance of triggering Incon for 6 seconds, this would be really good with like a Frenzy Band kind of build, if you were going to try and make Frenzy Band Incon work as an option. Could be pretty interesting for like these intermittent burst phase things. You get a proc and then cool, you get that. However, you have Convoke. Convoke is just kind of better. It's just outcompetes Incon. It's not even close. Maybe if they put Sickle of the Lion or something into Incon. I don't know, it's an idea, but I don't really like it because we have so much AoE damage right now. If we got Sickle, we're getting nerfed into the ground. It's not going to happen. But they need to do like something with Incon to actually make it powerful. Convoke 16 abilities. We're assuming that's going to be a 2-minute Convoke. This is then interesting. So this reduces Convoke the Spirit's duration by 25%. Now for me, and gives it an increased chance to do a more powerful spell, so Feral Frenzy. But the way it reads makes it sound like they're reducing Convoke from 12 abilities and... 16 abilities in 4 seconds down to 12 abilities and 3 seconds. But then that should then reduce the cooldown to 1 minute, not 2 minutes. Because that's what Unity does. So this is like Unity, but you wouldn't take this. Otherwise, all it's doing is making your Convoke force like 16 abilities within 3 seconds, which increases the burst and saves you 1 second so you can fit a global in. So it like reduces the burst stage of it, but it's not really worth a whole talent point. If this reduces Convoke to 1 minute, then it's good. Then it's good. Then you have Soul of the Forest, Classic, Apex, Classic. Vein Ripper, this is new. Rip and Rake and Thrash lasts 25% longer. Or Rip and Tear. Applying Rip to a target also applies a Tear that deals X amount bleed damage per combo point spent over 6 seconds. This is phenomenal if it works with Primal Wrath. If it doesn't work with and if you're on single target, then you take the Rip and Rake and Thrash lasts longer. If the Rip and Tear bleed is not that... Because, like, they could tune this for AoE, so Rip and Tear is, like, really good in AoE. Like, the bleed is really good when it adds up, you know, on, like, more targets. But on single target, it's not that potent. But then it makes your playstyle easier because your Rip, Rake, and Thrash last longer, which counteracts Circle of Life and Death, right? Which causes them to occur 25% quicker. So you can have all of the benefits of Circle of Life and Death with none of the stress, quicker pace playstyle. So it might work in a way. So like, remember we're talking about complexity here. This is a really good talent option to reduce complexity, but allow for damage to still be maintained. It also works out in a single target or AoE scenario. Okay, so I like this idea. That's everything on the tree. This video has been going on for a little while, so I think I will just give my final thoughts on what I think about this tree, and then I'll end it up. Look out for other videos coming over the next few days that are going to be talking about different build styles, things I like, things I don't like, da-da-da-da-da. We're going to have tons of videos coming. So, what I love about this tree is that you have a heavily AoE side tree. Like, all of these traits are all AoE. All of these are like, well, encouraged to be single target over the left-hand side. They've somehow managed to make a tree, which I didn't have faith in them being able to do, of an AoE and a single target side. They then have everything kind of amplifying bleeds. But it's like, do you want finisher bleed? Do you want AoE bleed? Do you want combo point generator bleed? Like, where do you want the bleed damage to come from? You then have quicker pace playstyles with like Circle of Life and Death and quick tick primals and stuff, and these AoE bites and Primal Wrath reducing Primal Wrath duration but increasing the damage, and or like front loading some of that damage so we get a bit more burst in our build, right? So you've got these ideas. You've also got some PvP elements with Frenzy and Adaptive and like Convoke still coming in, and I like the idea of like Apex plus Circle. Your bleeds are ticking quicker, which means you get more procs of Apex, which means you can trigger your Sabretooth with your Apex, and then you can Primal Wrath to have a massive amplified Primal Wrath, and then it does instant damage to everything. Like, I like all this stuff working with this tree. The different builds that I managed to come up with as well were these. So we had a mass AoE build, we had 2 to 5 target cleave build, we had a pure single target one way, we had a pure single target benefiting with Rake, or emphasizing Rake. We had another single target build that Buff Me made, which actually I think is pretty much that one. We then had a combo point generator build. Or, yeah, combo point generator emphasis. So all of your damage should be coming from your combo point generators rather than your finishers per se. Might not be super strong, but it's interesting. And then this is an Incon build. This is where you're playing into like Incon procs and Frenzy Band and Build a Berserk. So I like that there's different build options, and this is just in a couple hours. Imagine what we can do when things are tried and tested and we can play things out. I really like this tree. Those are all my positives for it. My negatives, there's not enough utility, and there still outright isn't a reason to bring Feral Druid to content unless our damage is absolutely bonkers. But then that's a tuning thing, and then people will just be crying for us to get nerfed. So you're in a very tentative position. What would be better would be to get some kind of like leader of the pack or like a shroud, like leader of the pack, but like Mark of the Wild, but better, specifically for Feral Druid, right? Or like there needs to be something to uniquely want to bring a Feral Druid, because all the other Druid specs, they're all going to get Innovate, they're all going to get Mark of the Wild, they're all going to get like Typhoon and Vortex stuff. So like Feral needs something unique that we can bring. Otherwise, we're not getting into content, because we're going to compete against rogues, we're going to compete against other melee, we're going to compete against boomkins. We need something unique. We need more. And like also, there's a lot of these traits which are just like really high damage traits, and a lot of them together are going to be really insane in terms of damage output. But like, the problem is that you don't really have to decide between that many things. You don't have to make that many sacrifices. And the way I'd want to solve that, right? If Blizzard's watching this, don't go, oh, they have too many good things, let's nerf all the good things. No, that's not what I'm saying, but give us choice, right? If I can choose between a group shroud or Circle of Life and Death, suddenly that's a decision. Suddenly that's like, oh, how much do we need shroud here? Can this get me into a group? At the same time, I'm gonna lose damage here, so what do I want to play around? Like, make us have decisions that potentially sacrifice damage for utility, but it gets us into the scenario, it gets us into the content, and then we can play around with that stuff. I'd like to see utility come into this tree. There are a few other issues with this tree I'll talk about in greater detail. Some things need to get moved around. It still needs to get iterated on. For example, Infected Wounds is way too heavy an investment. Taste of Blood, way too heavy an investment. You have to come into an AoE side to get a predominantly single target ability. Stuff like that. I'll talk about that later. Adaptive Swarm being bad. Really hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. I know it was a bit of a long one, but there's so much stuff to cover. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.